Hello everybody, welcome back to some Chainmail Supernova. This video is going to be about textures and some simple movement. But the first question that needs to be asked is why Ursina? And what you're looking at right now is exactly why I think you should learn Ursina. First off, for those of you who already know some Python, Ursina is probably the best game development framework you can use for Python. And for those who maybe don't know any Python already, you might be better off learning Python first, unless of course you know some other language very well, because Python is one of the easier languages to learn. So easy language, easy framework once you know the language. That's why. Here's the other thing. Before I started using Ursina, I tried to learn with Unity and Unreal, and neither of those really worked terribly well for me. So I've actually found Ursina easier to learn, and then on top of that, once I had learned Ursina, going back and learning again with Unity and Unreal and now Godot or Godot, depending on who you ask, all of those elements that make up how we make those games have become a lot easier for me to understand. So even if you don't find Ursina to be something that you want to use in the long term, I still recommend learning it in the short term, just because it's really going to help you down the road when you learn some of the more, the beefier game engines. Okay, so where do you begin? Well, you begin by installing Ursina. You're going to need an IDE of some sort. I prefer PyCharm, but you can use whatever IDE you like. And here's where you're going to do your pip install Ursina. I already did it, so it's not going to take very long for me. It might take a lot longer for you. Shouldn't need to pip install anything else. Everything that Ursina works with, including Panda 3D, and the like, all of those will be automatically installed when you pip install Ursina. So pretty easy to get set up. And then we are just going to load everything. So from Ursina, we are going to import the whole shebang and not worry about it. And with that one simple line of code, we have an entire world of elements and functions and whatever else now available to us. So the basic framework for an Ursina program is we need to actually name it some sort of application. So we're going to say app equals Ursina, capital U, and you got your parentheses there. And then finally we're going to do app.run, oops, that is a comma, app.run. And if I run this, you are going to see a very boring nothing sandwich. It's a blank screen, but I didn't put anything in there. Depending on which version, you may be able to X out of the box. My version, I'm not able to, so I actually have to stop the program. And one of the first things I'm going to do then is to find a way to actually get out. So with Ursina, getting user input really comes down to two things. There's something called update, which we probably won't deal with much, if at all, in this video, but that's useful for continuously happening things, you know, most games. And then the other thing is input. So let's actually do that right now. So we're going to do def input key. And Ursina already knows all about this, so no need to mess around with it. It is what it is. And we're just going to say if key equals Q for quit. Then we're going to do application.quit. I'm not going to bother checking that because we already saw a boring screen. So one of the first things we want to deal with is what does an image on the screen look like? And there's a lot of different things you can do with 3D and 2D. They all fall under the umbrella of entities. I'm specifically right now going to just take a quick look at what a sprite is going to look like. And now in order to get a proper looking sprite, we actually need assets. Now I've already downloaded some assets here. You can see grass texture, pixel town, and slime 1. The slime 1 is a transparent PNG. I forget if these ones are transparent or not. Fortunately, it doesn't really matter. Only the slime 1 needs to be transparent. And you can make your own, you can import your own. However, if you want to do what I'm doing, please come check out my itch page. I have a slime and grass sample. I will include a link in the description, and you can just come and download these 3 things and put them into your project folder. You'll notice I made a separate Ursina tutorials assets folder. If you don't put it in the assets folder, it's fine, it's still going to work. But sometimes it's nice to have a separate folder for your assets just to kind of keep things organized. So what does a sprite look like? I'm just going to say S for sprite equals, and we actually have a specific entity called sprite. That's part of Ursina. And all you have to do is say what its name is. If you don't have your assets in a separate folder, you can usually just kind of type in what it is. I recommend right-clicking on it, going down to copy, path, and reference, and then we are going to do path from content root. And again, interestingly, things are a little bit weird here because it gives me one thing more than I want. I actually want to start with the Ursina tutorial folder and not that dot virtual environment. So now when I run my program, you're actually going to see something. Oh my goodness, it's gigantic. So we have this gigantic green slime. You can see I don't have a weird white boxy thing around it. Believe it or not, it is a square picture, but because of the transparent background, you can see behind it. So if I press Q, I quit out of my program, and great, everything's working so far. So things I want to do, I want to add movement, I want to change the size, I want to add background textures, so there's still a lot to be done. But the first thing I want to do is kind of undo what I just did, only because I find a lot of times with Ursina, you're best off making your own classes that inherit the entity subclass, or I should say superclass, because you can do individualized functions for each one of your classes, so not everything has to follow the same rules. This may seem a little unnecessary right now, but I think it's a good habit to get into. So even if you disagree, that's what I'm going to do, and you can just skip ahead till we get to the next part. Anyway, we're going to do class, and I'm just going to call it a slime, and it's going to inherit the entity subclass. And what we need to do is we need to def double underscore, oh, did I screw something up? Let's try that again. Def double underscore init self, and we're going to double star and keyword arguments, or kwargs as I like to call them. This just says let's take all of the stuff that entity has and count that in our slime class, and then we have to super dot double underscore init double underscore self and kwargs again. Now I've been informed one of those things that I did there is unnecessary. I don't remember which one, and nothing bad ever happens when I include all of them, so we'll just do that. So hopefully you have some experience with classes in Python. If not, that's pretty easy to pick up, and honestly, doing Ursina is what made classes make sense to me. So if it doesn't make sense to you, that's okay, follow along, and hopefully it'll make sense to you soon as well. So the first thing I want to do is set a model, because every entity has a model type. You can make it a cube, you can make it a sphere, you can make it a quad, there's all sorts of different things. I'm actually going to make it a none. And the reason being is I don't want to have a specific model. I'm just going to have like a space kind of just set out on the screen for me to work with. And I'm going to put the sprite on top of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do self.rep for representation. And that's going to be my sprite. And actually, why don't I just take this? I'm going to get rid of all that eventually anyway. So cut and paste. Eventually I'm going to make this a slime, so we'll get that set up. And in fact, actually, since I did all that, you will notice that if I click play, it's going to look exactly like it did before, even though I drastically changed the code. So at least you can see that it still works. So now that I have this, I want to make it smaller. So let's go scale equals, let's try 0.1. And I don't think there's anything else in particular I need to do for it right now. So let's get a look at this and Oh, I know what I did. I spelled scale wrong, but I also want to do parent equals self, because eventually we're going to move this thing around. So what's funny is when you misspell something, it's not always so obvious. There we go, much smaller. If you want yours a little bigger, you can mess around with the scale. It works, you know, as you would expect. I'm not going to go into great detail on how that works. Okay, so great. Let's include some movement now. So I want to back up one indent because I'm going to define another thing here. So we're going to do def input, and it's going to give us self automatically. We also need key. And this will actually work independently of the def input key that we have outside of this class. So we can do both. So first, let's just look at some what upward movement might look like. So we're going to say if key equals up, arrow, then we will do self.y plus equals, let's go 0.2. We don't want it to move too quick. Of course, we'll do the other directions in a moment, but I just want you to see what it's going to look like. Every time I press the up arrow, this guy's going until we can't see him anymore, and Q will still quit even though it comes from a different area. So what we can do is set up all of these other cardinal directions, whether it's good form or not. Oops. No, that's right. Okay. Whether it's good form or not, I like to just copy paste. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Got to be careful about your copy paste. And I'm just going to change it to down arrow. We'll do the y coordinate minus equals 0.2. The left arrow is going to be the x coordinate minus equals 2, and the right arrow is going to be the x coordinate plus equals 2. And let's test. When people want to know why I love Ursina, this is why. Look at what we're doing already. And it wasn't even that difficult. Not that much code. And we got something that at least resembles a game already. Okay, well, what else can we do? Let's see, I said I wanted to have some sort of background. So now let's make a background as well. I could make a class for a background, but because I'm just going to have a background and really nothing else, we'll have it be its own thing. So we're going to say BG for background. That's also going to be an entity and not a sprite or anything else. And we're going to say that the model is quad. The scale is 5, why not? And here's where I'm going to need my texture. So texture equals, and once again, I am going to copy reference and do it this way. That way I don't have to type all that in and risk misspelling something. So we now have a background that actually looks pretty good, to be perfectly honest. I thought it was going to look worse than this. That's okay. Because this is nice and all, but if I made this bigger, it's just going to make the image bigger. In fact, let's do that so you can see. Instead of scale is 5, now I make the scale 10. Oh, that's extra funny too. It even covered up my slime. But you can see that it just made the thing look bigger, and at some point, bigger is not going to be better. There are things you can do to make the slime on top, but since I'm changing this, I'm not going to worry about it. Let's take it back to 5. But I also want to tile it. I made this grass texture a very specific way as a teaching tool, and tile set underscore size equals, and this is kind of backwards thinking. We actually want 0.1 comma 0.1. the smaller you make these X and Y things in your tile set size, the more tiles show up. So in doing this, I have now tiled my grass texture, and you can actually see, if you look very closely, there's little lines in between these. There's checkerboards. For a real game, you probably don't want that. Maybe you do, I don't know. I wanted to make sure there was just enough stuff on the side of all of these tiles that I made so that you could see exactly how it's tiled. And if you count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm not going to count. It's 10. It's 10 by 10 because I made the tile set size 1/10. Therefore, it's 1/10 the size of that thing that I'm texturing on. So it takes 10 of them to fit all the way across and 10 of them to fit northward. And I can go up and down and left and right. Now I'm on my grass. Okay. Let's say you don't like green on green. Let's say we want to change the grass color. Why not? I was going to change the slime color. I've changed my mind. That's allowed. Color equals color dot, and then there's a lot of default colors. Now the interesting thing is when you have some sort of texture that already has colors, it doesn't really quite change it exactly as you might think. But we're going to try color.azure and see what it does. When you have uncolored things, you can make it just blanket whatever color you want it to be. And if I hit play now, okay, and that changed. You can see it's a lot bluer now, at least kind of along the lines. And depending on your screen, maybe you can see the slime a little bit better now. You can change the color of the slime somewhat, but probably your best practice is to make all of your images the colors you want them to be before you put them into your game. And that way you don't have to mess around with stuff like this. Okay, I was going to do something with collisions, but I think this was a pretty solid lesson, and I'm going to save that for a future lesson. So hopefully you enjoyed. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will catch you next time.